I can either be like the 16-year-old girl with excitement of like, what's next? Or I could be like, oh, what's next? In fear. And I thought, I'm going to be the excited young girl that's excited about this. And when I started seeing that as an opportunity, it switched things around.
You're listening to the Work in Progress podcast, and we are your hosts, Dana and Angela. We believe your work and career should evolve with you, and it is therefore always a work in progress. In this podcast, you will hear stories of people who turn their careers from something that no longer serves them into something that complement who they are and their life goals. The way I like to think about it is that their careers are growing and stretching just like they are. Our goal is to inspire you to get out there and to make the changes you want for yourself and your future self. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Work in Progress podcast. Today, we're very excited to be talking to Frannie. In the past, Frannie worked as a teacher, administrator, project manager, and today she is a podcast agent. She helps solopreneurs build their audience and become the go-to industry expert in their field through podcast appearances. It's really exciting to talk to another person who has experience going through all these transitions, especially during the time of COVID. So thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm awesome. I'm so excited to be here. Transitions are the number one thing in life, right? You're always either in one, you're coming out of one, or you're going into one, So
Yeah.
I think that it's a very timely thing. So when I stumbled across your podcast and started listening, I was like, this is so perfect because we are all works in progress and you're constantly, in an evolution to get to your next stage and phase, I guess, in life.
Thank you so much. So excited to have you here. I know that you've been through quite a few transitions yourself. And first of all, I want to ask you a little bit about your background. How did you get started in teaching?
So from the time I was a little girl, I'm one of four. So I have three brothers. Actually, two of them are cousins, but in an Italian family, everyone's kind of like your brother or your sister. And so I used to always sit them down and try to teach them from the time I was a little girl. So I knew that was a trajectory that I wanted to go into. And so when I went to college, then I knew going into college that I was going to enter education. And my grandmother had said she was an immigrant. My mom herself is an immigrant and worked really hard. And she said, okay, I'll pay for 4 years, whatever you get done in that 4 years. So being the overachiever and the only girl in the family, I said, okay, I'm going to get 3 degrees in 4 years. So that's what I did. So I all my degrees are in education. And so I knew nothing else. So to branch out to some of the places I have, and we'll wait until you get later into the conversation, but it was a big, huge reach for me. But so I have pretty much always have wanted to be a teacher. And that was where I ended up in 1997. I got my first teaching job, a few months out of school, and then was in the classroom until 2010.
I see. And what did you teach?
So I taught middle school English at an all-girls school on the east side of Cleveland. I absolutely loved it. Some people have questioned like, oh, I don't know if I could ever work in all-girls school. How did you like that? And I absolutely loved it. Obviously being a woman, but the way that we empowered students and, just the philosophy and the pedagogy of an all-girls education was very different and foreign to me. But it was wonderful. So I taught English, which has then helped me because I do write. I've written a book and I'm currently writing a book as well as, doing blogs and things like that. So it certainly has helped me to know, when to use the comma and direct address, or can I use a semicolon here? So that English background has certainly helped me.
Ah, nice. Do you feel, you must feel like when you were teaching middle school, all girls school, I wonder, obviously I don't know, but I'm just imagining that maybe it just feels like you're talking to you're talking to your little sisters and you're trying to, help them grow and teach them English at the same time. That's such a very unique experience, I guess, because I don't have a little sister. I have an older sister, but
that's the perfect description of it, Dana, because, not having children myself and not having other siblings, it was wonderful because I would just treat them, I'd be like, okay, we're going to take a little break right now. We're just going to do some yoga and we would just stretch and it was just so
That's
fun.
adorable.
It was,
I love that.
it was, and it's funny now because crazily enough, a lot of my students are now, have been graduated and they're lawyers and they're nurses and they're physicians, and they'll write me and say, Miss Foltz, you'll never know the impact you had on me when we would lay on the ground and we would do our breathing and we would put our hand on our chest and a hand on our belly. And I'm like, who ever knew that, as a 10-year-old student that would impact them? But you're exactly right. Like having that kind of influence and impact. And, for anyone who's listening to this too, just recognizing that planting seeds, like you might never see, like not all my students are going to email me and say, whether good or bad, hopefully it's more good. But the impact that you've had on them, but, certainly things that you say or do along the path can certainly, be watered and cultivated and hopefully harvested later.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of my favorite teachers, actually my middle school teacher, and she happens to be a woman too. She wasn't my English teacher, but she was my math teacher. And I think she was the person that actually got me to enjoy math. And I think having a good teacher that you like and you can like is able to teach you without making you feel like this is all for a test. Something like
Right.
that. It makes a huge difference and really affects you down the road. It's not just when you're there a student. It's like lifetime, actually.
Right.
So
When it's
thank you,
interesting,
teachers.
and I know exactly, we need to give all teachers, especially now during, COVID and everything, giving such an appreciation with virtual schooling and all the ways in which they're pivoting. But one of the things I think about, I'm very much a relationship person. And I think relationship, especially in business, should come before anything. People before profit is what you oftentimes hear. And I think that's so true. And, I think about how just pouring into my students, yes, if they learned, if this is a gerund or an infinitive, that was great. But what mattered most is that I believed in them and encouraged them. And, I think if, like you just mentioned, Dana, like if we think back to our schooling experiences, like most of us don't remember the trigonometry test we took, or, maybe the dissection of the frog, what that bone was, but we'll remember that the teacher incited in us a passion for learning, or they believed in us, or they encouraged us to reach more, or think differently. That's really what I hope, that I was doing with the students all those years. Yes, I wanted them to learn. And of course, their parents are paying for an education. And I think they learned along the way because they knew that I cared about them.
That's amazing. And tell me about the transition that you left. So when you left teaching, what did you do and why did you leave?
So in 2010, then I pivoted from the classroom and I was then an administrator. So at the same school. And that was really the first time, ladies, where like my eyes were open to something beyond. I always joke that, I was doing sales, I was doing admissions. And so, I always joke though, as a teacher, you're also a salesperson, right? I was getting my students I was selling them on the idea that writing a persuasive essay was exciting and fun, And so now I was doing that. And still in the administration side, though, in the school. And so at this point, then again, very much relationship building, but it opened my eyes to marketing. All of a sudden I was looking at, oh, this is the language, or this is the sales language, and even though we never talked about it like that, that's really what it was. I was sharing experiences and sharing stories. And then of course, the advertising side of things, having open houses and meet and greets and, different events. And that really then gave me some experience and exposure to managing events, managing groups of people, doing things. I used to like take little videos on my iPhone. I would get a group of girls together when a student got accepted and I would, congratulations, Angela. And they would, and I would send off a video, and the parents loved that like personalization. So then when I was doing that, and my boss, I had a really good yield. It was my first year in it, and which meant all the students who we accepted chose us. And I had 100%. And she said, what did you do? And I said, I just created relationships. Like I would call the parents and just say, hey, I remember your dog, was going in for hip surgery. How did that work out? And they would just say like, are you calling me about the application? I was like, no, I'm calling about your dog. Like, didn't you have the surgery yesterday? Or something. And they just loved that, like that attention. So I realized like I'm onto something. Now, I also didn't mention this because it was more my side hustle. I've always had a side hustle, and I think it's important for people to have a side hustle. But I had worked at Disney when I first started teaching in 1997. I started working at Disney. So talk about, the kings and the queens of customer service and excellence. So I had learned about how to go that extra mile. If somebody dropped their popcorn on Main Street, I would just swoop right in and pick it up and be like, oh, here you go. And, magically disappear with new popcorn. And so I had learned that as customer service. So that was certainly something that was a part of my informal training, if you will, albeit formal in the form of a job, part-time job. So then that helped me then to pivot when COVID happened. And I was like, well, I kind of have this customer service thing dialed in and this relationship building thing. And that led me to then launching my own business now. So I have a very niche. And if it's okay with you, I'll kind of just dive into that. I know you didn't ask the question. And if you do have a specific question, by all means, I will circle back to that and we can piggyback. But it's funny because, people ask, well, how did you get into this? And it's certainly something, as I've just shared in the story so far, it's happened over many years. The English background has helped me then to writing pitches. So I call myself like a podcast, concierge. So I really help people get on podcasts, which is funny because I'm on the other end of it now where I'm actually the guest, which is hugely exciting for me. So thanks for having me. But I started, thinking about the relationships that you build and then the connections you have with people, not only with my clients, but then also with the hosts. So now I have enough of, credibility with hosts where I'll just call and say, hey, I've got somebody who I think might be a really great guest. Are you interested in learning more? Or here's their media sheet, or, here's a website or whatnot. So it's a lot of those foundational skills that I've learned along the way that kind of led me to this circuitous route in this niche that I don't even think people knew existed, or that does exist.
Yeah, that is so amazing. I just want to say, all of the things that I heard so far, you also already gave a summary, but I just want to kind of highlight that one more time, because a lot of the times when you're coming from not to say that your background is not traditional, but when your route or your career path is not very linear and, you're not seeing the same kind of industry, and then you're going from maybe entry level to the executive level, sometimes you're a little concerned. And at least that makes me feel a little worried because I feel like I'm not advancing. But you really, did a really good job of using all of your combination of education background and your English teacher expertise and your customer service kind of knowledge from working at Disney, which is a world-class company that's known for their customer experience, and then your passion for building relationship and putting people first, which is something that's unique to you. Mm-hmm. And then all of those combined, like you said, kind of helped you create this little niche and your own business right now, which is helping people get on their podcast. I think that's just really amazing, and maybe something that you never imagined or you never pictured yourself doing, but then kind of just along the way you realize you have all of these skill sets and experience, and now there's something that you're interested in doing and you just jumped right into it.
100%. And like you just mentioned, Angela, I think that, they say that millennials or, this generation, that they will have a number of careers. It's upwards of a dozen careers, and they're not just talking jobs. They're talking careers, completely pivoting. And so that's remarkable in and of itself, during the course of their 40 or 50 year, career span, that they'll have the number of careers. And I think, I'm in my mid 40s and I think to myself, wow, I would never have thought that. And, when I first started teaching in 1997, podcasts weren't even a thing. I think that the first podcasts were in 2004, so I was definitely ahead of my time. But again, I think it goes back to one, knowing what your talents are and what your giftings are. And then also two, knowing how you can serve people. When I was let go from my job in February, I sat down on my last flight. I was going to New Orleans and I thought, okay, what's next? This is my last work trip. What am I going to do? Even though I'm getting a severance, I have to figure out what are my next steps? Mm-hmm. And I was going to travel, and I just sat down on the plane, you girls, and I just started writing okay, what are the things that light me up? What are the things that I'm jazzed about doing? What are the things that I hate and that zap my energy? And I literally just started listing things. And then I was like, all right, what applications do I know how to use? And I just started okay, Google Slides, Google Drive, the basic things, Microsoft Word, anything, database systems, everything that I'd used all along my way. Who are the mentors who I've really looked up to in the past? What are the things that I like about their jobs? And I just started brain dumping. And it was this divine download where God was just pouring it into me. And I literally wrote this little book, and it's called From Your Fire, from that girl's fire, from your fire to that girl's on fire. And it's all about making transitions in life because, as we mentioned, you're always transitioning into something, whether it be into a relationship, you're going into a relationship or out of a relationship or into motherhood or, into an empty nester. You're constantly evolving and transitioning. And so to have, almost like a practical roadmap, it was helpful for me because I've had a lot of transitions in my life, whether it be literally being homeless, breaking off engagements. Like I've had an array of things in my life that have happened. A lot of them choices, I would definitely never be a victim about that. But how can I help somebody and put them first to help them navigate through a transition that they might be going through too?
That's amazing. And was that when you wrote your first book? Tell us about your first book.
Yes. And it was my first book. So I am Christian and I feel like God has given me this probably about 3 years ago. He said, it's time to write a book, more of a memoir. And I started writing and I have 90,000 words written right now, but it's awful, girls. If you were to read it, you'd be like, what is she like? It's all over the place. And literally I just sat down and I told a story about, being in 5th grade. And then I told a story about my high school homecoming and, just, it's all over the place. So I have all these words kind of in this Google Doc at this point. So this was my first book that I just wrote in February. I self-published, literally wrote the book, edited the book, got everything, my cover, everything up and done in 3 weeks. Like I was like,
wow,
boom. I mean, it's only a 90-page book. So it's not like it's anything that crazy, but it was enough, that I was able to get it out there. So I have that. And then I now have just restarted, oh my gosh, the undertaking of writing my book now. So I'm really kind of diving in and I've taken a course, I've hired a coach, an author coach. So I'm working on that now because I really want to commit to this by the end of this year to at least have some semblance of at least a manuscript to get out there with my 90,000 words, even though I have a feeling that 75,000 of them will have to be scrapped.
And what is the second book about?
Great question. Because again, in the outlining process, I just started writing and it was my memoir, but now I know that it needs to be more for a reader, right? Like it just can't be about my stories because it's not going to be about helping them. So it's about owning your worth and about knowing your boundaries. And so in relationships, physically, intimate relationships as well as friendships, I've learned a lot of things, when to say no, teaching, you teach people how to treat you and things like that. But then also how that has impacted me in career, in my career as well, knowing those boundaries of when to say no, when something is not ethical, especially being an entrepreneur, sometimes you go after the money because you're like afraid that you're not going to have it. And so here's a perfect example. A couple of weeks ago, I was interviewing a client. I always interview my clients because it's a two-way street. And as I mentioned, I'm Christian. So I work with a lot of Christian entrepreneurs. And oddly enough, a lot of them are authors. So I'm on a phone call with this gentleman and he was sweet as anything, but he dropped all these swear words. And there's no judgment in that, but that's just not me and my brand. So a lot of the podcast connections I have are also Christian. So I thought, I can't have this guy going on there. And I don't want him, and so we got to the end of the call and I just said, you have an awesome story. Your book sounds awesome. I really want to read it. However, I just don't know if we're a right fit. And I went on to explain that. And so with that being said, I think that is really important. Going back to my book, the theme of it is knowing what your boundaries are. And I had to say, okay, this is what is valuable to me. And this is what I value. So I'm going to have to say no to picking up this high-end client, at the cost of it not necessarily being in alignment with what my value system is.
And how in the middle of all of these, I mean, you have your own podcast, you interview your clients before you actually bring them on. How do you balance your time between writing a book and, working on your business?
So I actually my podcast is more, I don't know, I call it more of like a vlog, right? Like almost like a video blog. But on Sunday nights, I do mine. And I just do them live and then I just repurpose them over on YouTube at this point. And so with that being said, those are pretty easy. And I just love getting on and talking with people. But with writing the book, I make an intentional time. So what I did was I found out, I know I'm best in the morning. I'm an early bird. I'm not a night owl also. I get really good rest. And then I wake up in the morning and I have a really good routine in the morning of, prayer time and just quiet time. And then I just literally start diving in. And I block out 4 90-minute blocks throughout the day. Really, after about 1 o'clock, I'm spent. Like there's not as much creativity. And so between 60 and 90 minutes, I really try to get that before noon. And then I try to have my meetings only on certain days. I have my meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays. And I really only try to then write Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then, of course, on the weekends, I really try. So it takes a lot of structure and discipline. Like you have to treat it as your full-time job at this point, even though it's not. So I'm working a lot right now, but because I have a deadline and want to get it out there, I'm really kind of focused.
So if you're done by 12 and then you have these 4 blocks of 90 minutes, that means you start at 6?
About 4:30 is usually when I
What?
wake up.
Really?
Yeah, well, I
Wow.
get up because, and my prayer time is usually like I have a prayer time and routine in the morning, and that's usually I walk and
Okay.
in the mornings, and I just do that. So from like 4:45 ish, by the time I get my coffee and whatnot, until like 6 is kind of my own personal quiet time, and then I kind of dive in around 6:30 with kind of sitting down to write.
Mm. This is okay. This is interesting. It's obviously a bit off topic, but I'm the opposite of you. I'm a night owl, and recently I've been trying to wake up early because I was reading about it, and then I noticed that a lot of the things I want to get done actually don't get done because usually I do them at night, and then just lately when I try to get to them at night, I'm already too tired. So
Right.
I heard about, doing all those things in the morning and the benefit of that. So I decided to try it. And in the beginning, I was doing well. I actually bought like what do they call like a wake up alarm clock. It's like a light
Mhm.
that turns on. So that has been helping me. And so for a while, I was able to wake up at, I think, 6, which is
Mhm.
extremely early for me. And then I really do see the benefit of, just get like having that quiet moment for that, like you said, you have like an hour and a half to yourself, and that's such a like a golden hour. I feel like you can get what you want to do, get started in the morning, so they don't get derailed by whatever happens in the rest of the day, and that is so amazing. But I don't know how. Like, so for example, if you wake up at 4:30, that means when do you sleep?
I
8?
go to bed early as well. I usually go to bed
Yeah.
around 9:30. Like I really try to turn off
Okay.
my phone. I put it on airplane mode, usually around 9, and my
Yeah.
friends and family know that.
Okay.
And I don't take it off until I'm done with my quiet time. So I don't check email. I don't check Instagram. I don't check the weather. I don't do any of that until after I've had my quiet time. I do have like an old iPod that I use, and I will check I have a Bible app that I use, and I'll check the scripture and things like that. Or sometimes I'll use it for commentary or referencing. But otherwise, I really try to stay away from technology during that time. I try to read, journal. I don't know if you know Hal Elrod. He has Morning Miracle, or
Mm.
Miracle Morning. I can't remember which one it is, but he has a great book. And as you know, too, both of you ladies know, any successful entrepreneur has a morning routine. Before they go into work, they have their
Mhm.
entire day has been like thought about, they've kind of intentionally thought about the people they're going to meet with, what they're going to say, all of those details. And I've always been a morning person. And, I help people also. I'm a fitness teacher as well. And so I would always tell people I used to teach class at 5:30, 3 days a week in the morning. And the class would be packed, ladies. There would be like 40 people in there. And I would always
Wow.
say, nobody needs you at 5:30 in the morning. You know what I mean? It's very unusual that people want you or they're calling you at 5:30 in the morning, but
Mhm.
5:30 at night, everyone wants your attention.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah,
even at
that's so
9:30
true.
at night, it's so much easier to get distracted or throw in the load of laundry. Whereas in the morning when it's quiet, you don't want to wake anyone else up and you kind of have your own little routine. So that's always just worked for me.
Mm, got it. Yeah, that's yeah. Thanks for agreeing to derailing with me a little bit, but this is a very, I guess, a topic that I'm really really interested lately. So thanks for indulging me. But
Sure.
we should get back to the career transition part. So let me see. So you left corporate America, and what was that transition like? Coming out of it and then starting your own company, figuring it out. I think you touched on that a little bit, but I'm interested in learning more about it. Like, what's the actual process? What did you actually go through?
Sure.
And yeah, was it difficult? I imagine it must be kind of hard, but just tell me about it. I'm interested.
Sure. So first of all, I was let go from my job. And I think that just like anything, like in a relationship or anything, nobody wants to be rejected. So I went through a lot of emotional stuff like, oh my gosh, like even though many other people at the company have been let go, it wasn't like I was isolated. It still took a toll on me, mentally, where it was like, okay, I was rejected, like they don't want me to, not everybody was let go. And so that kind of took its own toll on me. So I had to really like dig in deep there and just say, okay, like this is not, there's the expression that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. Like I get to see this as an opportunity. And there's that commercial for insurance and there's a 16-year-old girl and she comes outside and the script is simple. It's 2 words. She says, my car. And she's super excited and she sees her car and it has a big bow on it. And then they, split screens and there's the guy who comes outside and he's a, middle-aged man and his car's being towed away. And he goes, my car. It's the exact same expression, but their perspective and their circumstances were completely different. And I thought to myself, I can either be like the 16-year-old girl with excitement of like, what's next? Or I could be like, oh shoot, what's next? In fear. And I thought, I'm going to be the excited young girl that's excited about this. And so when I started seeing that as an opportunity, it switched things around. And then when I started doing some research and what were people doing? And, I kind of fell into, as I mentioned, the podcasting thing. I just started reaching out to all my friends. I was like, hey, look, I've been let go from my job. This is my skill set. What are some things, do you know anybody who might be looking for this, this, and this? And, I was doing project management. A lot of things were in the online space. So I was able to help people with, setting up landing pages or conversion pixels. And I had experience or, hey, I can do an Instagram story, So a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, my fiance, I think, he's in his 60s and he's wanting to make a transition. Like maybe you could help him. And I was like, awesome. And so he was an amazing first start. And then he was the one who I ended up starting to get on podcasts right away. And I thought to myself, wait, like this might be a need. I was able to book him on over 50 podcasts really not quickly, but I started figuring out the perfection. I perfected a pitch and then I would listen to podcasts and then there's millions of podcasts, as you ladies know. And I was like, there are so many ways I can go ahead and pivot this. And, my business name is Shine With Frannie. And my goal is to help amplify other people and help them shine, to be able to take what their story is because everybody has a unique story. Everybody has something to say because their experience, even if you've seen the same movie, you're going to walk away from that movie with a different experience because of your own background and, the schema that you come into that with. So that was where I was like, I think I can do something with this. So like you said, you had mentioned earlier, Angela, it took my education background, my writing background, my customer service experience, my relationship building. And I was like, I'm going to kind of craft this. And then I just started kind of rolling with it. And sure enough, here we are, ladies. So it was, it's tough though. And I will be honest, you had asked, tell a little bit about it. As they say in everything, all relationships, they're good, but they're hard and they're hard, but they're good. It's hard being an entrepreneur. You're constantly okay, who's in my pipeline, setting up social media, hiring a VA to set up my social media, doing the different things that I'm doing. And then also, it's so good because I get to be flexible. I get to have my own hours. I get to meet new people. I get to travel places, all of those things, but yet it's hard, So I think that if somebody is listening to this and they're like, I want to do that 100%, go all in, do it, try it, figure it out. You'll figure it out, find a mentor to help you along the way, which is the number one thing I think is important for any person and in any phase of life, whether you're losing weight or whether you're in a relationship, you need to have somebody who you're looking to and aspiring to be like, who you can get wisdom from. And especially with starting a business this day and age, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say that you would be doing this if you were not let go from your previous company?
Not at all. I wouldn't have thought that, this was almost like a resourceful, I have to figure out how I'm going to make this happen. And, my family, I come from a very traditional Italian background and my family, just the other day, somebody said, does your family even know what you do? And I was like, nope, they have no clue, and I think to myself, because it's something that's one, it's niche, and two, it's kind of more progressive and new age, rather than my family who's just like, so are you going to get a job or have you sent out any resumes? I'm like, no, I'm kind of doing this whole podcasting thing, and so it is interesting. I think a lot of people don't understand a lot of the new careers, if you will, because they are so non-traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think that there's something we said. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's so interesting. No, that was my fault. I totally just was going to go off on a tangent. I think there's something, as I mentioned before, I'm in my mid 40s, there's so much to be learned from the younger generation, whether it be working from home or working from a coffee shop or having casual Fridays. We have so much, just the way that I think that so many younger people are very innovative and outside the box thinkers. I know that sometimes millennials get a bad rap and oftentimes like, oh, that they're lazy or they're unmotivated or something. I've heard that, from people who are my age. And I'm like, but how can you work within that? Like, they're not lazy because they're wanting to work from a coffee shop. They're just wanting to work differently. It just doesn't look the same way that we work,
Wow, you're so nice. I feel like a lot of millennials must be so happy right now.
Well, I hope so. I think that there's too many times where we don't look at the opportunity to learn from, whether it be the younger generation or the older generation. There's something from everybody, right? Like millennials have just as much to learn from our generation and the generation before me as well. And that's where I think the open-mindedness, coming into it saying, what can I learn? How can we do things differently?
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Yeah. Tell us about how you found your first client.
Girls, it was cold calling. I literally just put it out there. And again, that's where it goes. It speaks to having those relationships from all those years, and I just started picking up the phone and I literally started cold calling, which I was not really familiar with. I'm not in kind of the sales that way. I know that some professions, like they want you to have 25 calls a day, in certain fields. And that was not my deal. And even in admissions, a lot of people came to us. I didn't have to do as much cold calling. So for me, it was humbling, to pick up the phone and to say, hey, I just lost my job. This is what I'm doing. Do you know anybody who might need some services? And, and I was willing to do anything in the beginning. And that's one thing I think too, for anybody, recognizing that there's nothing. And I told people there's nothing that's too low for me. There's nothing that's beneath me. Like if you needed me to scrub your toilet for a while, I would do it. You know what I mean? Because I think that that's where like I learned grit. And also that's what has made me successful in my jobs in the past, where they knew they could ask me to do anything. Like, oh, hey, Frannie, will you go on this field trip with these students, for a week in Cape Cod, which, hey, I'm not complaining about that by any means, but, it was an undertaking of time and energy and resources to go with these, it was just a bigger deal, but I've always been willing to, hey, sure, send me. Yeah, let me do it. You need me to schlep that box? I'll move it for you, whatever it is, I've always been willing to do it. So I was willing to do whatever, when I was first let go in February, I just started reaching out like, hey, if they need me to, write a blog for them, I'll do that. If they need me to, make phone calls for them. I was making phone calls for one of my clients who is a real estate agent. And I was just calling and getting referrals. And I was kind of doing her telemarketing. And so I was willing to do whatever it took. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And did you actually, so when you said cold calling, you like actually call them, just because nowadays there's so many different ways of contacting people. And I wonder, like, have you tried a few different kinds, and maybe do you find one platform works better than the other or anything like that?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Angela, because I think you're right. Like meeting people where they are, right? So if I knew, for example, my one client who ended up signing with me, who is in his 60s, for him, it wasn't going to make sense to send a DM, right? Or to send something that was just, electronic. I had to pick up the phone and call him, or I couldn't hashtag and be like, hey, So, so that I kind of have to meet people where they are. But because I was really looking at my inner circle, and I was like, all right, let me identify 10 people who I know have a very, very, very wide net, and who can cast a net wide for me. And I just wrote those 10 people down. And you guys, I don't want to say it was easy, but literally by the second day, I got a phone call back like, hey, I actually know somebody who. And so I was able to sign a 5-figure client that same week that I was let go from my job.
Wow. That is awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, which again, that's not normal. And I don't want anyone to be like, oh, that's way too easy. It's not easy. And that 5 figures was over the course of 3 months, not over the course of, a week or a month that I was making that money. But I was able to come up with a proposal and get, everything dialed in, and was like, hey, does this work for you? And, how does, which part of this works? So, and that was that. And so since then, it's definitely, evolved, if you will, because I've had to meet people where they are. So now I use a lot of LinkedIn connections, which is actually how I connected with you girls, and I just used filters on LinkedIn to connect with, podcasters. And, that was kind of how it was. And it was funny because many of my clients, I have one other one, but I was intrigued by yours, and I listened to a few episodes, and I was like, I'm like, my clients, I don't know if they'll be good fits because they've kind of like the one was in a career for 25 years. It, like, so he didn't really have a lot of transitions. And then another one, he was actually in prison, which is really interesting. But I was like, I don't know if that's the kind of transition they're looking for. But I was like, I might be able to speak to this, which is the reason why I was like, hey, if you are ever looking for somebody, I might be able to help out.
For sure. This is so interesting. And I love that you mentioned grit. That reminds me of something that I guess I don't normally share this part of, like, you know, it's definitely not on my resume, but I think this was when I was just starting out. So at my first job, I had just something came to me and I felt like I needed to learn how to, I remember, sorry. This was when I was first starting to become interested in the business side of, I guess, any kind of business. Even though I did graduate with an economics degree, I think at the time I chose to do something that was a little more relevant to my science degree. And I think a little bit into the job, I felt like, okay, I understand how it works and how operations kind of work within a laboratory setting in some kind of a life science company. But I want to understand a little bit more about the business side of things. And I have no idea how to, like, get my hands dirty, if you will, to do that because, you know, I was like a year into working my first job and after college, and I just like didn't really know anyone. So I decided to just kind of find I walked into actually a quite big food service chain kind of restaurant really close to my first job. And I just asked them if they needed help. So then I got interviewed on the spot right away and I got a job, but the job was a service job. So I was as a server, I was just working there after my first job. And I will say that's something that, you know, something that's like out of the blue kind of almost and does not really fit with anything else that I have on my resume. So I never had it really on my resume. But when talking about like grit and what you can learn from any job, regardless of what it is, that's always going to be the number one job that I want to talk about, because at that job, I learned that yes, the customer is always right, but there are always ways to kind of engage with them when they're not really right. And you just have to know how to do it and always be respectful and things like that. And it really taught me to kind of see that, you know, I guess understand and see people in the service industry a little bit differently than how I wouldn't have if I never worked in the service industry myself. And yeah, I really like that you mentioned, you know, you sometimes just have to be like willing to do almost anything and everything there is to kind of get started. And from there on, you can learn so much more and you don't even know what you're in store for. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's something if, you know, I could give an advice to anyone that's like in the younger generation and they're maybe like late teens or early 20s, I would say is you just, you know, take any opportunity that comes your way and try to make the most out of it.
100%. And don't you treat people differently in the service industry, Angela?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because you literally, because you, now that you've been there, you know that, oh, you know, your stereotype or like any kind of a common stereotype of people that are working kind of behind the counter, you really don't know very much until you're in it. And they actually are capable of doing so much more. And their job is actually quite difficult, you know, sometimes handling people that are coming in when they're like having a bad day. And yeah, I think I heard somebody kind of made a comment about how if you're in the service industry, you understand that people kind of take all of the bad things out on you in all of your interactions with them, like unintentionally. And sometimes, you know, subconsciously, they're just like maybe a little more rude than they need to be. Right. But that's kind of just like, you know, something you learn once you're in there. And you having gone through that, I feel like I just, you know, have so much more respect for all of the different jobs out there. And because, you know, every job really teaches you something. So yeah, I think it also kind of fits with what you're saying, you know, doesn't matter what it is that you need. I'm willing to do it, even if like, you know, you kind of did some telemarketing for one of your clients, which is not really what you were in it for, but you did it anyway. And then that led to something else.
100%. And, you know, it goes back to the cold calling. And I think what's important too, you know, I don't have children of my own, but thinking about how, you know, when I'm with my nieces and nephews, for example, we'll go to the movie theater and, you know, you leave your popcorn or whatever on the ground. And I'll be like, oh, well, we're going to throw that away. And they're like, oh, well, someone's going to come and clean it up. I'm like, what if in 10 years you're that person?
Exactly.
You know, like you can do your part. Like you ate the popcorn, like be responsible, be full of integrity. And if you can help them out and like, the lady at the gym who's cleaning all the equipment down right now. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Like, I'm so grateful for her because, and there's nothing like, what if that was me 20 years ago, and I think just there needs to be a space of gratitude around that too. So I think it does teach you a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing what like the bits and pieces of wisdom you picked up along the way of your journey. And so good to hear these.
Well, and I think that's what's important too, is that we have to, just like you mentioned, Angela, like, okay, well, what did you learn about that? Like you just talked about like customer service and like the customer's always right. And I think in any experience, like you walk away saying, okay, what did I like about this? What didn't I like about this? And hopefully the pain point that you didn't like is what's going to pursue, push you to pursue something that you do like, oh gosh, I can't take this anymore. And I always tell it to my one friend, she's in a job that she hates. And I'm like, well, you don't hate it that badly because you would be doing something about it. You would be looking for a new job. And she's like, well, that's harsh. And I'm like, well, it's true. You know what I mean? Like if you really, really hate it, you're going to put your resume together or you're going to, you're going to start looking and figuring it out, but it's comfortable. You know what I mean? She gets a steady paycheck. And so it's not too uncomfortable for her to make that move. Same thing with your weight, right? Like, and I think about that all the time because I've had extreme weight loss in my life. And so I think, okay, well, when my pants don't start fitting again, that's when I'm like, okay, I need to do something rather than buying new wardrobe every season, like it's the same thing in your career. So.
Absolutely. So I'm interested in learning more about your podcast, actually. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
So as I mentioned, it's not a full-fledged podcast because it's more or less like a live talk show. So it's like this, but I do no editing and everything is just completely, raw. And so I just have on different people who can inspire people. And it might be, I call it right now, Frannie and Friends. I have an idea for Frannie on 5 where I talk about 5 different pillars of what are important to me, but I'm holding off on that, I think, until when my book comes out. But right now I just bring on different friends. And I'm very sociable. So I always say that I've never met, there's never been a person that I haven't met that hasn't become a friend. So I just bring up, like last week I had a friend of mine who came on and she talked about the money mindset around entrepreneurial poverty. So she talked about how entrepreneurs will oftentimes pay everyone else before they pay themselves and how we have to kind of pivot, that mindset and replace that. I had my brother on. Both of us are on online dating. He's divorced and I'm single. And so we talked about our online dating experiences and what to look for in a profile. And so they're just kind of random things, but things that I think might intrigue people. Oddly enough, girls, he got dates from it. I did not. So I'm just saying. I'm not so sure how that worked for us, but
people reached out after listening and then they wanted to.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Oh, for you, it was, I know it was really good because, and most of my audience is all female. So it was totally fine. And they were friends who I knew and they were like, is your brother single? And I was like, yeah, that was the whole point of doing this. It was not to get us dates. It was to bring awareness to, and we called it, he said, she said. So it was like, I said like, do you let her pay or do you pay? Do you kiss on the first date or not? So it was kind of like rapid fire kind of questioning where I was answering and he was answering our perspectives on it. So yeah. So I feel like I can almost do one of those, like, because strangely enough, I know a lot of people who are single, whether it be because they're divorced or whatnot, in their 40s and 50s. But I feel like that might actually be a talk show.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to say that this could turn into something very, very interesting because that's a topic that obviously everybody is interested in, and yeah, that's so brilliant that sometimes, all these ideas will just come out of what you're doing and being an entrepreneur, you can just pursue them. That's so great.
It's so interesting you say that because, they said that online dating has jacked up since COVID because no one's out. You know what I mean? Nobody's out in the public. And so because of that, everybody was online dating and, everybody had all the time in the world. So they were all sitting around at home looking at apps. So, and profiles. So I thought, well, maybe I should do something. That's actually, I haven't dated in almost a decade. And that was actually what started it for me was I was like, maybe I should go back on and just kind of see what's out there. And so that's how it kind of started. So we'll see. Yeah. But my ultimate dream, ladies, is to have a talk show. And I've had that dream since I was in 7th grade. I've always wanted to have a talk show. And so I know what the marathon, what the finish line looks like, but getting there. So having this little podcast niche and listening to podcasts, being on podcast, getting people connected to podcasts, I'm getting a lot of experience of what I would do and what I wouldn't do. So I think I kind of consider this my market research. And the good thing is I'm making money while I'm doing it. So
yeah. Definitely. I think you will be collecting a lot of good topics along the way. So I'm excited for that. Like if you have a talk show, I'm all for it. I'll be your number one listener.
Well, I was going to say you girls might get to be guests. So how about that?
Yay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Actually, a question just popped into my head, and I was wondering maybe you can answer that for me. Um, so since you help people, build their branding using podcast and these technologies, I was wondering, what do you think? Like, do you have any advice on creating a pitch for yourself in the podcast space?
100%. The first thing you want to do is make sure you give a compliment to the person, listening to their podcast. And then like, for example, when I, messaged you guys, I went and I listened to your podcast before I connected with you, before I emailed you. I was like, oh, these girls are awesome. And like, I read over your bio. So I knew you guys were twins. I had read some information. I did my research on it. So, and then that would be the first thing is, making sure you give an authentic, genuine compliment. And then the second thing you want to do is make sure you're going to share how you're going to provide value for them. Like, I'm not here to talk about me and my talk show. Like, I'm hoping that somebody walks away saying, wow, starting a business or the transitions or, there's hopefully a little takeaway for every person who's listening to this, at least one takeaway, because you want to be able to provide value for the audience that you're presenting to. This is not about me promoting, anything that I've shared so far, whether it be a book or, the book I'm writing. Hopefully this is going to help somebody who's going through their own transition and they're a work in progress as well.
That's amazing. And also, another thing that you mentioned earlier that I kind of want to circle back is that you said that you seem to have a natural ability to, let's say, you're very, very good at customer service or building relationships. Do you have any tips for that?
100%. First and foremost is always think about, okay, what would that person want? And so as Angela mentioned with her, experience working in the service industry, everybody loves a compliment, right? So whether it's the girl at Target and you're like, oh my gosh, I love that lipstick. Like yesterday, she had these fancy nails and I was like, your nails look amazing. Are those for Halloween? And she was just like, you could just see her like light up. And so just really being genuine. I don't think we do that very often. And people oftentimes will say, oh, hey, how are you today? And my response, girls, I'll say, I'm just like I look, good. And it's not that I believe that. It's not that I'm arrogant, but it just makes people laugh. Like people are like, oh, that's funny. And so if you can just like connect with people in a way that is just not your staid, kind of response of, I'm good. How are you? You know what I mean? Like getting people to think and laugh and smile. And so I think for me, just really just being genuine with a compliment and always just connecting with people, finding a way to connect with them, asking open-ended questions. Obviously, I was a teacher for years where if I just say, did you like that movie? Yes. Or what was your favorite part of that movie? When I was a teacher, I would ask my students those kinds of questions, not just, closed-ended questions. So really trying to have those engaging conversations and then saying to somebody, well, tell me more about that. Or, wow, that sounds really exciting. Just like what you girls are doing tonight, today, you're circling back and like, oh, tell me about this and go a little deeper. And who doesn't love talking about themselves, right? So having somebody share a little bit about their experience, they walk away feeling better. So I think that's like, those are some keys I would certainly say is, being genuine and compliment somebody and then kind of asking those open-ended questions that's going to give you an opportunity to find yet another question to ask them. And then the third thing, as I mentioned, girls earlier, for sure. And I apologize by calling you girls, ladies, I should say.
No problem.
That feels like, not that you're, I feel like a wrinkle rancher over here because I'm so much older than you. But with I also think that learning from other people, there's a guy, he's from Cleveland and I lived in Cleveland for years. John DeJulius is his name. And he has a great book called Secret Service. And he's actually consulted with Starbucks and Disney and Chrysler and big Fortune 500 companies. And so I've done some of his trainings and he's all about the secret things of the customer industry. Like, for example, he owns a beauty salon. And so if you go to his beauty salon, the first time you get a different color cape than if you're there as a third time guest. So the first and second time they treat you, the capes that you wear when you get your hair washed and whatnot and haircut. So they treat you very differently. They come and they give you champagne or wine, or they ask if you want water, they'll do your nails. They'll go ahead and give you a little nail polish change. And then guess what? By the second time, you're like, I'm hooked. Like I got this above and beyond service. And so that's really for me was like learning some of those little tricks. Like I mentioned earlier, like when I would call the families and say, hey, tell me about your dog, nobody was just calling to find out about their dog. And then I was like, oh, I don't even know where your application is. I haven't even looked at it this week. I just sincerely was calling about your dog. You know what I mean? So they were like, oh, it made it feel like I was genuinely caring about them and not about them coming to the school. So then they felt cared for. And it really was genuine. I really did care about the families.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that.
Actually, you mentioned something that I'm really interested in. So I'm going to ask, sorry, so many questions.
Oh, no, I love it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that to ask open-ended questions. And I feel like that's something that's very important to do, but I am just so bad at it. Are there any like easy ones that you can ask? You know, for example, like you mentioned a good one. What was your favorite part about the movie? I think that's excellent. But I think sometimes when I'm trying to, talk to someone and I just don't know what to ask. What are some easy ones you think?
So I think, telling like, for example, this morning, some of the girls had a birthday party. My birthday is next week. And I said, okay, why doesn't everybody go around and share your favorite or most memorable birthday experience? Like just being very open-ended versus like, just, when's your birthday? You know what I mean? Like that's something that's just like a closed-ended, like, okay, October 6th, versus what was your favorite memory, or what was, and the one lady went on and she was like, well, I told all my friends to come for a birthday party and we actually weren't having a party. And I was like, well, that was certainly memorable. And then that started and I was like, well, what did your mom say? And, when all the kids showed up at the house, like, so then it just led to very naturally asking those questions. And I think too, anytime you can try to tap into an emotion, because people remember emotions, they don't remember facts as much as they remember emotions or stories, if you will. And so really being able to anchor that, like, for example, when I taught English, I used to have to try to anchor something that my students were learning in something they already knew. And so to be able to do that. So it's the same thing in our lives, right? Like now that I know Angela's story about, I love that she was so full of grit. She just went in and said like, hey, do you guys have any jobs? And on the spot, she was interviewed, and then I would say, well, what did you learn? What was the number one thing you learned from that job? Or, how did that job help you for the next, how did that prepare you for your next career and things like that? So I think just being genuinely concerned about people and wanting to know like what their experiences have been. And Dana, I would reframe. I don't think you said I'm so bad at asking these questions. I don't think you're bad at all. It's just also too, like you're just learning, we're constantly learning new questions to ask. And I think you're great at it. So
thank you so much. That's so nice of you.
What advice do you have for other people that are also thinking about starting their business during COVID? I feel like now it's just a little different than like, last year or even like January this year. Like COVID just like throws kind of a wrench into a lot of things. And since you were so successful doing it yourself, we love to share, any advice you have.
So I think the first and foremost thing is looking to see how you can meet a need. And so mine was very niche and it was, I went to, like I mentioned earlier, I just went to some of my friends and I was like, I cast the net far and wide. I really didn't know. I knew that I had like these 5 skills that I was really wanting. Like these are the things that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And again, people were like, well, what exactly do you do? And I initially was calling myself just like a PR person because I was helping people like just get connected with like, whether it be a person who is going to do your website or whether it's going to be the person who, I was just more of a connector for people. And I'm like, but how do you get paid to do that? And I was like, I don't want to necessarily be an agency. And so then I started thinking like, well, everybody has a story and I love being able to help share that for people, but I don't want to write, people have asked me to ghostwrite for them. And I'm like, no, I don't want to, that's such a labor of love. It's just labor. I don't even know if I love, would love doing that for someone else. I love doing my own things. But, so I thought, so I think that looking in and see, okay, well, there's a need. Like, as you girls know, like both of you have full-time jobs and you're doing this. It's like people are busy. And so many entrepreneurs are doing so many things in their business. For them to write a pitch, listen to the podcast, research them, doing all the things, if you will, air quotes. There's a lot that's entailed. And I thought, well, what if I just make that into a concierge service and just say, I will do it. I'll send you the links. I'll put the headshot up. I'll send them the bio. I'll do all the things for you. And they're like, great. So that's how it happened, where I was just like, well, I can meet a need if they're maxed out. They don't know, the people to connect with. They don't have the time to do the research. What if I just go ahead and do that for them and meet the need? So look and see how you can meet a need with the strengths and the things that you like doing. If you don't like doing it, just because it's meeting a need is not going to fill you up.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And as an entrepreneur yourself, do you have like a go-to person, source, or any kind of like source of knowledge that you kind of use as to like guide yourself in this journey into building your own business?
Yeah. So I have a coach. I work with a coach. I think that's hugely important. And you do have to invest in yourself. That's the one thing is, you have to invest in yourself. And not only that, but then that also provided me with a community of other entrepreneurs who are doing similar things, who I was able to say like, oh, well, tell me about this. Or what do you, even for podcasting, like what microphone do you use? What headset do you, they're basic things,
Yeah.
but it just provides for you that community. So you feel very comfortable being able to ask questions. And then also it gives you that encouragement of like, okay, well, what's working here and what's not? And someone who's not in the weeds with you, sometimes you get caught up. So I think that's a huge component to being successful. And again, I'm in a constant work in progress, ladies. So, on any given day, it's like, exactly, which I love your podcast for that reason. But so that would be the first one, is making sure you invest in yourself, working with a coach, I think is hugely important. And then as I just mentioned, being able to be in a community where you feel comfortable to be vulnerable, because you're going to have to say, oh my gosh, I messed this up, or, oh my gosh, I tried this and I spent $10,000 and it didn't work, and now what? Sometimes I think that we're afraid to say like, I messed up or I failed. Now what? So if you have, even if it's just a trusted few people, right? There's that expression, be careful of people who are in your circle. You want the people who are in your corner. And I think that's huge, because you might have a lot of people who are part of your inner circle, if you will, but not everybody's going to be there to cheer you on. Not everyone's going to be there to be like, excited for you and encourage you, but the people who are in your corner are. So that's huge.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Frannie. I think that probably wraps up all of our questions. Is there something else that you want to talk about on the podcast? We can go.
No, I think that, hopefully this was comprehensive. Hopefully it gave people some insight and, some takeaways to be able to walk away and hopefully have at least something that they can go ahead and, implement. I really think it's important to have practical and tactical. Like, it's great if you're inspired, that's one thing, but if you're not going to take action, then that's a whole other thing. And actually, people can go to my book if they are in the transition. I give them 7 practical tips and tools to making a seamless transition. So one of them, I talk about finding your sensei, finding that mentor. I talk about, honing and zoning. I talk about creating goals. So there's a lot of practical tips, and it's a workbook because of the teacher in me. So there's exercises at the end of every chapter that are like, that. It's really, yeah. And I'm like, it's a workbook, which means it won't work unless you do. So you have to go and ask yourself the questions and make a point to, reach out and have lunch with somebody, or, have coffee or make a phone call. So it's very practical, and, write the deadline, write the date that you confirmed it, all those things. So it kind of holds you accountable.
That's great.
Perfect. And where can people find you online?
So I'm at Shine With Frannie on every platform. So on shinewithfrannie.com is my website. And then on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, it's all Shine With Frannie. And then, of course, if they just type in, Shine With Frannie will bring you, all of my handles are also at the bottom of my page there too. And they can subscribe, and they'll get that free ebook when they subscribe, or they can buy it on Amazon. A cute little tip there that I learned from my coach. She has the book available to purchase on Amazon, but you can also make it for a freebie for their email. So FYI, if someone is an entrepreneur and they're like, what do I do with this? Can I make money? Yes, you can. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that tip with us.
You're welcome. Hopefully, somebody will use it. Maybe you girls.
Thank you for your time today. Thank you so much for all these wonderful wisdom, and really, really love your sense of humor. So I really enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Angela. You guys are the best. I wish you only the best too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You just finished listening to an episode of the Work in Progress podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you share this with someone who can benefit from it, and leave us a review on iTunes. Don't forget to let us know what you think, or if you have any questions. You can find our contact information in the episode description. Keep doing the good work, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.